All right. Welcome to the Ujamaa Hour. I am your host, Michael Tekin Strode, here for our second Monday, Movement Monday in February. We are in the month of Black History. You know, we can give that honorific to it as built and established by esteemed ancestor Carter G. Woodson prior to. And we can also acknowledge that, we live not only in the past, but we live in a running stream of time that is the future, the present, and all of those things together. We live in a continuity. And so this is, Black History Month. This is Black Futures Month. This is Black Continuities Month. We can claim and name all of those things. And we are here to hold that with you here at the Ujamaa Hour. And again, I am your host, Michael Tekin Strode, founding coordinator of the Coconut Collaborative, which is Chicago's only time-based service and skills exchange, otherwise known as a time bank. We simply look at what communities have established within themselves, what communities need, and we try to do some engaged social matchmaking among those offers and needs. And so those are the things that we do inside the time bank. That's what the platform exists to do. But ultimately, we are also forecasting, we are thinking towards, we are looking towards, we are tilting towards what does the future economy look like? What does the sort of resource mapping look like of the future? So those are the things that we engage with within the time bank. That's our main initiative, the time banking. But of course, we branch out and we branch out into other spaces, other cooperative economies, other solidarity economies. And we are engaged in those sorts of conversations as well. So we really appreciate you all joining us on this second Monday of every month as we engage with a different change maker, thinker, activist, organizer, human being, who's engaged in this aspect of building this Black social and solidarity economy. So of course that we call this broadcast an intimate and informal exploration of the Black social and solidarity economy, because what we do here is we have conversation. There's not much news that is made, and as you have ideally seen, I don't necessarily control this interview stage. This is the story of the folks who are here in this space. And sometimes one question will launch them into a much, much longer dialogue than I had anticipated. And sometimes I have to draw a nudge and ask a few questions. And I'm open to those sorts of things. I'm open to that because my desire and my curiosity is satiated when we have these public conversations about what we are thinking and what we are doing, what we are imagining, what we are building. And I really appreciate the opportunity that folks offer, in terms of sharing their time to do that each month. So there are a few things that I wanted to kind of dig into before we got into the discussion with our guest this evening. So we'll be talking to a little bit later here, Katelyn Johnson of Blackroots Alliance, and you will have the opportunity to hear the full, a robust story of what Katelyn has been working on over the course of her career. So I anxiously, we await that anxiously. But before we get to that, there are a few things that I wanted to dig into and let you know about in terms of developments that are happening here in the Coconut Collaborative, happening here within the Chicago ecosystem. One of those being that the Coconut Collaborative has recently, been told that we have the Field Foundation grant to expand the offers and needs market facilitator network here in Chicago. And just to kind of, give a small snippet of what that means, the offers and needs market process is something that, we have been facilitating as a part of our time banking orientations since about 2019. So, we kicked it off in the fall of 2019, picking up some tips and tricks from Post Growth Institute. And this is sort of, in the sort of nascent space of the pandemic. So it certainly wasn't anticipated what an important facilitative process it would be as we came into the space of the pandemic. What does it actually mean to actually get a community of folks in the room and dig into what their offers are, what their skills are, and what the needs are in that space? And how do you do that matchmaking between those two spaces? So it has been a process that has been permeating not simply, the orientations of the time bank, but several other spaces. There are other spaces that where folks are using this in advance of meetings, in order to open up the space of the meeting so that it's not simply focused on what we are doing here, but it is what is happening within our lives, and how can we make sure that we are whole people who are showing up in this space, and how can we make sure that we are connecting with one another beyond the tasks that need to get done. So, beyond the sort of task orientation of capitalism to the actual relational orientation that ideally, the future economies that we are building are tilting towards. So that's something I wanted you to know. Look out for more information. I will have, a more robust link, and an application process coming out shortly for that. And the goal here is really just to build organizational infrastructure in Chicago for folks to facilitate not only this process, the offers and needs market, but to learn other facilitation techniques and tools and strategies. Because if there's one thing that I've learned by becoming a little bit agile at facilitating meetings, it's that there are so few people who are agile at facilitating meetings, and so it's a really important skill that we have some folks who are committed to working on, and we help to build that infrastructure in the city. Um, One other, the next thing that I wanted to kind of touch upon is that because we are in this space of this Black History Month, this Black Futures Month, if there's one thing that Black cooperators, know about, astutely and firmly, it's collective courage, right? So, if you don't have a text that you're digging into to really, ground yourself in the history of Black cooperation, the history of Black economic and social cooperation, then Dr. Jessica Gordon Nimhard's text, Collective Courage, is there is none better. So, please, if you don't have an assignment, make this your assignment. Go ahead and pick that up. Dig into Collective Courage. Dig into those histories. Dr. Jessica Gordon Nimhard is really just kind of drawing on information, insights that have existed elsewhere, that were spread out, and bringing those things together in one single text, just so that we can kind of really dig into the fact that we have these skills and we have these capacities and we have been doing these things before. So we have the opportunity to kind of do them again. And we just finished in Cooperation for Liberation Study and Working Group, Freedom Farmers, Agricultural Resistance and the Black Freedom Movement, Dr. Monica M. White, another, a lumen, esteemed star, in our cooperative space. So we really appreciate the land histories that are present here. Certainly, when we're coming out in Co-op for Lib with our a comic or a zine that's going to dig into some of the ideas that are in Freedom Farmers. So if you have not been in our Co-op for Lib Sunday gatherings, please join us. We meet there regularly every other Sunday. We just had a meeting this past Sunday. So we'll be back again in 2 weeks for our next session, February 14th. So, check into that 3 to 6 p.m. And, there'll be a link that'll be dropping in the chat a little bit later for that. So yeah, check into Freedom Farmers, dig up that text. If you've already read Collective Courage, get on Freedom Farmers. And then one that's a little bit more scholarly in its language and its design. The actually, Freedom Farmers is the most sort of popular history, style that Dr. Monica White has done. She's done a really great mix of both academic and popular history in that text. Dr. Jessica Gordon Nimhard goes there's some popular history, but there's also a lot of facts and figures and bibliographies and things like that, moving around. But Black social economy in the Americas is going to be the one that's the most academic in nature, but it's also the one that's the most internationalist in its orientation, right? So if you want to know about how the Black social economy exists all throughout the Americas, going all the way down, to the tips of South America and back up to Canada, right? How do Black people organize themselves economically in all of these contexts? There's none better than the work that's being done by Dr. Caroline Shanaz Hossein. So, please check into those 3 texts. Highly recommend it. And, and to a recent sort of, Dr. Caroline Shanaz Hussein is very good about this, about citing Black women. There's 3 Black women. You feel free to cite those Black women because they have done good work, they have done valuable work, and they have informed the organizing context in our current movement spaces. So, yeah, dig into that. and I would appreciate it, and I'm sure that you would appreciate it. And so, on to a few other things that I wanted to highlight. Um, One of them is going to be this podcast that I have been struck with. So I just finished episode 15 of a podcast by Nia Clark called Dreams of Black Wall Street. Dreams of Black Wall Street is true to its name. It's a history of Black Wall Street. Otherwise known as Tulsa, but more specifically the Greenwood district of Tulsa. And as someone who's an anti-capitalist, there's a lot that I often dislike about the way that we talk about Black Wall Street, right? I did see Boss when it came out, and I saw it with a group of folks, and the conversation about Boss, which was the history of Black something or other, in the Americas, but in the U.S. There's a lot that's really just about how we've been able to kind of survive and accumulate in capital in the U.S., right? Um, and it a lot of it is about ways that are extractive, are exploitative. It's about us emulating our oppression, and so and that's the way that we often kind of cast. We kind of take our present lens and we cast it back on Black Wall Street. And so, but I really appreciate it that Nia Clark dug into a very complete and complex narrative around the Greenwood district of Tulsa, really digging into the stories and digging into what people were doing in that space. Like, I mean, just at the base level, how did they get there, right? When you talk about the Trail of Tears and you talk about the history of the, so-called five civilized tribe and the Cherokee freedmen, how did people get to Tulsa? Like, what were they doing there? And then sort of how that context develops as people are they're marginalized, right? They're told you can come here and make some money, you can't spend it here, and don't be around here after sundown. So they went back home and they built what they needed in their home base. Now whether or not it's sort of right to think about marginalization or the context of marginalization as a boon to Black economic cohesion. That's not an argument that I think we can have right now. But certainly it's necessary that we really think about the complexity of Black Wall Street and think about the fact that there were tensions there, right? When you talk about J.B. Stratford and J.B. Stratford and O.W. Gurley and the sort of fights that they were having, about whether or not we needed to actually be pushing back against the oppression that's happening in Tulsa, or whether or not we need to be kind of to the Booker T. Washington quote, picking up our buckets and pulling ourselves up by bootstraps. That's a fight that continues, right? And it's important that we live in that complexity and we hold that complexity as we move forward. So I really appreciate the attention and tension that Nia Clark gives to that history, and I would highly recommend that you all dig into that Dreams of Black Wall Street podcast, and appreciate that history for yourselves. Um, and to the sort of cultural linking of that history, I tend not to watch popular culture, when it's popular, and I tend to watch it after. So I just finished, a viewing of Lovecraft Country, and I appreciated a lot about the sort of elements of history and speculation that exists there, and it connected to another podcast that I was listening to, right? So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on Lovecraft Country, just to say I dug it, I appreciated it. Um, but I listened to another podcast episode that had me thinking a little bit about something else. So Black in Appalachia, a podcast about, just true to its name, Black people who live in Appalachia, and what all of that, the complexity that exists there, right? And they are connected to Tulsa because some of those folk, who are moving on from Florida, connected with some of them folk who were in Appalachia, and they were like, look, they ain't treating you right in Memphis. You need to come out to Tulsa, and so. There's a connection, there's an intersection always between those migratory pathways. But Black in Appalachia had a podcast about something called Cupid Mansion, which, in Knoxville, they call it Blunt Mansion. It's, just another plantation. But this particular plantation, as most plantations are, built by the hands of a Black man, and this particular plantation's, hands were belonged to someone who was called Cupid at the time. He has a last name that I cannot remember at the moment. So listen to the Black and Appalachia podcast to appreciate that. But as I was listening to their podcast and they went to tour this Cupid's Mansion on Halloween, I was thinking about this notion of, because they asked the question at the end, as we're tearing down these monuments, what would it look like, if we actually had monuments to the hands that built this house, right? What would it look like if in 10 years, that the monument that's there in front of Cupid's Mansion was Cupid, right? And that connected to sort of the narrative that Lovecraft Country was telling about these elements of history, and these elements of magic, and the sort of the magic of history, the Orinthia blue, the sort of larger than life figures, and the ability to name ourselves, and that connected for me to a reading. I've recently completed my most recent reading of Pedagogy of the Oppressed and Paulo Freire's notion of cultural synthesis to combat cultural invasion. And so all of that is to say that, we have the ability through art and Afrofuturism, which we might talk about tonight, to combat cultural invasion with cultural synthesis, with cultural organizing, and with cultural offerings that root ourselves in in histories that are not only just about us, but really informed by how we love, how we connect, how we relate, and how we build together. And so, those are some things that I want to appreciate tonight with this opening. And with that, I want to go ahead and make an introduction here for our guest. Tonight we have Katelyn Johnson, Executive Director of the Blackroots Alliance. Blackroots Alliance is committed to the safety and liberation of all Black people. Katelyn is originally from a predominantly white community in rural Pennsylvania, crediting her Black parents as her inspiration to fight for justice. And as her father had cerebral palsy and was a home child care provider, and her mother worked multiple minimum wage jobs. So all of those things are gonna be in the superhero origin story that we hear from Katelyn tonight about. So with all of that stated, I want to introduce tonight's guest, Katelyn Johnson of Blackroots Alliance, and welcome Katelyn to the broadcast.
Thank you so much. I'm really excited to be here and have this conversation.
Absolutely. So, wasting no time. Every superhero does have an origin story. What is yours? What is the story that brings you to the work you are doing currently in Blackroots Alliance, and how is that work informed by the things that happened along that history?
Oh, yeah, my origin story. So like as you mentioned, I grew up in a small town outside of Pittsburgh, about an hour or so outside of Pittsburgh. Only 5,000 people in the town, and most of them were white. And my family had been from the general area since the 1800s. My mom's family actually is from Ohio. And if you look at a map, it's a triangle. It's West Virginia Panhandle, and then Pennsylvania and Ohio on either side of that. And that's where I grew up. All of those small towns, and rural rolling hills, was just my life. And we faced a lot of overt racism, and it really shaped how I um, processed what it meant to be a Black person in that space. And I had not heard of the podcast Black in Appalachia, but I can't wait to listen to it because I feel like there's going to be a lot of resonant moments, because there just aren't very many people that look like me back there and that weren't related to me somehow. So I have a very large family and love them all. But I, just grew up, in a very religious household, and so my faith also informs the work that I do. My dad had cerebral palsy, and was a home child care provider, but also more, I think, more meaningful to me is he was an amazing vocalist, and there was always music in the house. He was always singing, um, and he was one of the people who just really took care of the people in his life and took care of his community, and really believed in true cooperation, and that just all of us working together would lift everyone up. And those values carried with me. And my mom, worked, extremely hard to make sure that that I was never without. I had no idea that we were working class or poor. I didn't know because my parents made sure that everything was good on my end. Um, I didn't really realize class until I got to high school, and I met, you know, it was more obvious then. Um, but yeah, all of that kind of carries into what brought me to Chicago about 20 years ago. Um, 20 exactly years ago, 2000. I came here for college, and I went to North Park University on the north side, and it was the first time I had ever had a Black teacher. That's the first time I had ever lived with Black people who weren't my family, been in deep relationship with Black communities. And it was such a huge culture shock for me. But what I recognized is just the threads of how white supremacy had stifled and thwarted dreams in ways that really were painful to witness um, and to experience, recognizing the ways that I had muted myself because I needed to survive in a white supremacist world. And so I really got engaged in campus leadership, and my organizing kind of flowed from there.
And those studies at North Park were in psychology, or was
No, they were actually, well, I'm an English major, but there was a program at the time called Africana Studies, and it was run by this man changed my life, Dr. Roop Sims. Um, and it was like as much Black history and Black social theory as you could cram into like a 3 credit class, but it ended up being, it was a minor at the time. And so I took a lot of his classes, and that was the first time I had had an academic experience that really talked about Blackness outside of the Black History Month. And it was really talking about growing up. There were I tend to miss school during the Black History Month because I was the only Black kid, and I didn't want there were too many incidences when I was really little of people like turning to look at me and ask me questions, speaking on behalf of all Black people, like, were your parents attacked by dogs? Like, no, that wasn't my parents' story, but thanks for pointing out that happened to my people. So it was, I had never, so going to Dr. Sims' class was a Black history that was not filtered by white supremacy. It did not start with slavery, and that was really inspirational and expansive for me. And that I think, coupled with some of the circumstances that were happening on campus, moved me into organizing, because I wanted to create a community where Black folks could just be themselves, where they didn't have to filter themselves, where they didn't have to um, stifle their expression, and where they could just, I think collectively create a system that worked for everyone. And so a lot of my work on, in organizing since then has been kind of with that heart in mind.
yes. And then just kind of milestone, just kind of dropping in briefly to the action nowadays. Recognizing that organizations change, and as people move out of organizations, it's not like you're going to speak for the organization now. So I hold all of that tension. How does the sort of how does the your work evolve into sort of the this long term stint with Action Now? What was that sort of path like?
That started, so I, right out of college, I started organizing formally with Acorn. And I was there for 2 years and then left and did some other things. And by the time I came back to Chicago, Acorn didn't exist anymore, but a lot of the people who used to work there had started a new organization called Action Now. And so I got involved with Action Now. And part of the reason that, Action Now was just such a magical and powerful place is just the members, the grassroots leaders that would look, an elected official dead in the eye and tell them they were wrong. And they would go door knocking, and they fought, they spoke power to power. It wasn't just about just speaking their truth. There was a collective power and a collective identity that not, was inspirational and made some real change. Like everything, a lot of the Action Now work helped build the foundation for minimum wage fights and a lot of policy changes that I think were really meaningful. And it was really a great time to just really be immersed in community and to have folks who were longtime residents of Chicago who had been through all of the changes that happened in all of the neighborhoods, and have them really be in leadership in a way that was just profoundly moving for me.
Hmm. And so draw us all into the present day. So in the present day, you are director of Blackroots Alliance. Tell us, ground us in what that organization is and what you see as your current work in the context of Blackroots Alliance.
Blackroots Alliance is a network organization that works to build the capacity of Black leadership. Some people have called us an incubator for Black radical groups. Someone said that on a conference call today, and I was like, "Oh, I haven't used that phrase yet, but I like it." But it's really a space where Black leaders can expand their experience with organizing, can have thought partners as they are developing their organizations, and where we can have a community that is really working to build one another up, where folks can experiment with different tactics, experiment with how they want to build their organization to scale, and really work in creating an ecosystem of organizers and thought leaders and advocates and kind of all folks who want to create a path towards Black liberation, whatever that may look like. And so there's a lot of diverse thought and experience in the network. And the work really is both, supporting our partners, but also cultivating new conversations around what it means to fight for Black liberation. We hold a lot of space for folks who are just visioning and imagining and experimenting with radical imagination about what the world could look like on the other side of white supremacy, what the world could look like on the other side of capitalism, and what the world looks like now and how we can heal where we're at. And so we can live in the future now if we can begin to practice the world that we want to see. And so all of that goes to say we have a lot of stuff going on, and I'm very excited to be in the work in this new way.
Yeah, yeah, and maybe give us a context from yourself or your perspective. What does Black liberation mean to you? How do you ground in that definition? I know that in Co-op for Live we had an opportunity to do our collective retreat, and we were trying to kind of say how do we relate to these like seven cooperative values that are like international in scope, but grounded in Black culture, and Black liberation certainly came up amongst us. And so we found in each of ourselves, like, here's the meaning for Black liberation for the work that we're doing. So I'm just wondering what that means for you.
For me personally, Black liberation is the process by which Black folks reclaim their inherent power and create the world that allows them to fully express as themselves. So that will mean different things to everyone. And for me, that my definition of Black liberation holds space for all Black people to just be, own their Blackness, express their Blackness, in a way that elevates them and elevates their community. I think for me, Black liberation is also the dance between individual liberation and collective liberation, recognizing, we're all individuals and have our own traumas that we need to heal from, but we are born into a collective consciousness that impacts and informs the decisions that we get to make and the decisions that we don't get to make because of who we have been born and the bodies that we have been born into. So for me, Black liberation holds all of that. It's just Black folks who are doing what they need to do for themselves to live and be free and express their world.
Hmm. And I know that recently we had it in Co-op for Lib. So we have a cultural offering space that we've kind of carved out as a facilitation team. And that cultural offering was where the facilitation team used to pull a quote, and we would say the quote, and then people would kind of reflect on that for a moment, and then breathe out to the end of the meeting. But we were like, we need to bring everyone else in, right? So we had this cultural offering, and I know that one of the recent cultural offerings that came up, or one that came up in my mind, around this cultural synthesis that I've been looking at is really like new ritual. So I'm wondering about what new rituals or what new things you see yourself kind of creating as far as culture within Blackroots Alliance that would help to hold liberation, right?
Mm. That's a great question. I think the first thing that comes to mind is the fact that we're really working to center all of our work on wellness and wholeness and healing. So we have practices like our staff have Wellness Wednesdays where we spend some time actually just seeing each other as humans. It's not about what you've your goals for the week, work related. It's about like who you are and what you're experiencing. Um, and I think that's been new for me, a new ritual for us. I think the other ritual that we are intentional about is just recognizing the way capitalism has influenced the way that we process and relate to one another and the way that we do business, if you will. Um, Having an expectation of burnout is not liberation, and having an expectation that if you aren't working every waking moment, somehow you're not as dedicated as someone else who is. And so we have a ritual of challenging that and just recognizing that folks don't have to, burning out is not a badge of honor. It doesn't have to be, at least, but can we create systems and support so that folks don't feel like they have to burn out in order to accomplish their dreams and visions. Yeah, those are our rituals, I guess, so far.
All good, all good. I recognize that we are in this space where, again, like in Co-op for Lib, it's a new practice for us to kind of figure out, what are the new rituals that we are creating. I had the opportunity to listen to, another sort of podcast that was talking about the history of the white buffalo woman of the Lakota people, and this notion that, that scarcity grounded them in this new ritual of passing around the pipe to reflect on this story when the scarcity ended. So yeah, it's really just been in me to kind of think about like what are the new rituals that hold us together, right? Because for me, it's like if there's not some elements of culture that we create, there's no cohesion and there's no reason for me to remember it. Like, I have 20 years of organizations whose tasks I don't remember, like the task-based meetings, but the things that I remember are the relational things. So tell me about maybe the aspect of relationships and how relationships factor in your organizing, and then also maybe factor in your internal work. And one of the things that I sort of had in my questions, it was about, do the ways that you all work internally and organizing community kind of reflect the values of this world you see yourself as creating. But maybe you can just kind of simplify it to relationships if you'd like.
Relationships are, it's the primary unit of organizing. It's a relationship built on trust. And that's, I think where we start. And we have our network is, we have 5 organizational partners made up of dozens of people, but it's really important for us to have relationships that are not centered on the things that capitalism wants us to center on. You don't want to center on, you mentioned scarcity, so we want to work against that, and we are very open with things like funding and things like strategies. Like we see my hope, my effort, and as we're building this is to have folks really be able to see this as a collective effort of expansion. Like if one person wins, we all can win. And that relationship of just we all are linking arms and lifting each other up takes different forms. I think it depends on what the individuals need at a point in time, and being able to hold space for that. And allowing people to be who they are, as messy as they want to be, as focused as they want to be. Like, be however you show up. If you show up with the right intention, we want you to be able to be your fullest self. And I think when we're broadly with relationships, we don't want to. I don't want to create any space for gatekeepers. Like there's enough for everybody. We don't have to hoard anything. The reality is that abundance is all around us, and if we are able to tap into that, I think we can live more. We can live freer lives.
Mm-hmm. And when you're thinking about constructing alternatives, or what's the conversation like about alternatives inside of Blackroots Alliance? I know that, and like, I mean, I was on a call earlier this week, with Black folks building alternatives, and we actually had about a 5-minute conversation about should we be using the word alternatives. So I'm not going to rehash that argument with you, but there's certainly a challenge and a tension within not only the Chicago ecosystem but the broader organizing ecosystem about the things that we are resisting, the things that we are challenging, the systems that we are trying to disassemble, and these alternatives that we're proposing, the propositional. So I'm wondering what the conversation has been like. I certainly know that has broadcasted very deeply both their survival economies report and the Breathe Act legislation for Illinois. So I'm just wondering about how you see alternatives blooming or showing up in Blackroots Alliance.
I think that's one of the great part. All of our partners are doing something uh, to create an alternative. We'll stick with that language for now. But you mentioned survival economies report. There's also Medics, who is working towards the self-determination of Black health and creating alternative pathways for communities to be empowered to be responsive to health crises. We have Soul, which has been working on alternatives to the police state and really leaning into conversations about what would the world look like if police and prisons were abolished. Grow Greater Englewood is talking about alternatives and ways that we can reconnect to agriculture and become in addressing food systems inequities. So I think everyone kind of operates in a space of like, this system that we're a part of does not work. So let's build something else. let's focus on the places where we do have synergy, focus on the places that have actually in some ways been sustaining, that haven't necessarily made mainstream news and haven't been widely adopted, but have a lot of power to shift the power dynamics in these systems that are playing against one another. So I think a lot of the space of our partners is exploring what else could be possible.
Yes, 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 and some of those names. There are lots of names that resonate with me. Certainly, I've known you medics and Martine and Amika for a long time, and so yeah, I resonate with a lot of the work that's happening in the partnerships. And I saw Soul post about the water is life piece, which for me there was an element of uniqueness there, right? Because there's a little bit of been a long divide between sort of maybe there's been a little bit of a distance, rather, I won't say a divide, between this notion of like, whoa, like water privatization and environmental justice here, and then other aspects of Black organizing here. So just I appreciate it when I saw the water is life piece. um, so I function as someone who sits within a lot of the operational sectors of these spaces that I organize within. I have room to imagine, but I also need to kind of organize systems. So setting aside the fact that you are at operational center and doing director things here. What is the element of passion that you're finding yourself presently most intrigued by, the deepest curiosity that you're following at the moment, that's kind of driving? I mean, maybe it's connected to your work, maybe it's separate from your work. Just wondering about your curious inklings at the moment related to this work.
I'm really curious about the way people tell their own stories and creating space for folks to unpack their experiences. And I love having one-on-ones because it's the time where you really get to see who a person is. And I love COVID has not it's hard to have a one-on-one virtually when you haven't met somebody already, because I definitely thrive off of the energetic vibe that the interwebs don't always convey very well. But over the last year, we had a couple of different events where folks were just telling their stories, and we had and you attended one of our Afrofuturist storytelling events where folks just wrote about their perspectives and their lives. I love being able to um, help people see the brilliance in their own experience.
Mhm.
And part of that is creating safe spaces for them to tell their stories. And there's so much beauty in just people's everyday lives. And so I'm fascinated by just learning about people and learning, ways that they um, are visioning for a better world for themselves. And really leaning into that and expressing that through writing or through any other type of art, and just through conversation and building relationships, like folks who are really able to I think be seen and want to be seen, and I want to be able to be a safe space for them to be seen.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, I'm very excited about stories. I did recently stumble across on Nextdoor, I think originally, but there's this Black Cornerstones project. I don't know if you've ever encountered that yet, but apparently the Center for Story-Based Strategy is helping to fiscally sponsor or somehow support an endeavor here that is about like both storytelling and story and kind of injecting story-based strategy into this ecosystem here. So, I only have one phone call with that person. They called me up to say they weren't having their Saturday event. And hopefully I'll get a chance to talk to them again. So that can be a lead into a current project that you did invite me to participate in, which is about this notion of Afrofuturism and Black liberation. And I'm just gonna append anti-capitalism on the end of it just because I want to, but doesn't have to be there. But tell us about the project that you're assembling with Gorman Publishing is the name of the publishing house.
And Gumbo Media. So it is a project called the Blueprint for Black Liberation, or Black Liberation Blueprint. Um, and the blueprint is really a resource for folks to uh, have. There's a variety of topics from based off our 5 pillars of Black liberation: wellness, economics, democracy, education, and safety. And so people have submitted works based off those pillars, and we've had some really cool things submitted, everything from essays to poetry to art, and so it is just a space for folks to just have their interest piqued and kind of learn more about the different ways that folks are working towards Black liberation. There are some more academic pieces that were included, just to kind of round out research and ideas, so that it's um, not just personal experience, but also some research and some study to it. Although I think there's extreme value in personal experience, and so we're really excited to launch that by the end of the month. So our contribution to Black History / Black Futures Month.
Absolutely. Yes, yes. And as you have been going over those pieces, as you've been looking at those blueprints, as you've been examining the work of Blackroots Alliance, are there, I mean, if you were to kind of, pick out like, 4 values, are there things that you would see as the framework for the economy that you all are constructing? We talk about the solidarity economy framework here. I recognize it's sometimes an unfamiliar and cryptic term, and also, when I'm in solidarity economy spaces, I'm telling them too. It's an unfamiliar and cryptic term. Like, say something else when you're outside. But yeah, what is the sort of values that kind of inform the framework for the economy that you all are building through this publication and Blackroots?
I think that's a good question. I think with the publication, we're poking holes in economies that don't work, and creating space for folks to imagine what could. I don't know that we've landed on any particular structure, like this is the path for future economies, but I don't think that's our role. I think our part of our role is to just generate conversation. Like, what are folks even thinking about alternatives to capitalism? Do folks, it's the system that we were born into, and maybe folks are leaning towards, so a phrase that I heard recently was, I think, benevolent capitalism, and I didn't really understand it, but I'm not an economist, so maybe it's a thing. But stuff like that, where folks are just like, okay, there's something about this economic system that's not working. What isn't working? What could work? And what would it feel like to be in that new space where things are working? And so I think with the blueprint, we're also just wanting to give folks an opportunity to have their thoughts amplified. Folks who may not, be, you know, professional journalists or anything like that, but just folks who are, some of the people who submitted are just people who have really good thoughts and are just wanting to have their voices heard. So I don't know if that answers your question about what economy we're creating, but I think we are creating a world where um, there's access points for as many people as who want to join us.
Hmm. Yes, and that's a fine answer. It's definitely, I think people, when I ask folks that question, I feel like they think I'm trying to pin them down, and I am definitely not. I am not prescriptive. I am true to the values of pluralism in the solidarity economy space. And yeah, I'm always wondering, right? I'm wondering where people's heads and hearts are, and trying to kind of gravitate and navigate there with them. Um, so you are currently working on some work around systems theory or systems thinking. Is it that there's a current study pathway for you there?
That's so funny. I forgot that I told you that. So I was getting my master's degree in consciousness transformation studies, and the class that I was in was systems theory, and it was a fascinating class about how human consciousness shapes systems and how those systems shape human consciousness. It was this intersection of psychology, philosophy, and spirituality, and it was a lot of coursework. It was really intense, and I think, part of my academic explorations are still in that vein, although I'm not in that program anymore. Um, I That's where I want to go, is really being able to unpack how human consciousness shapes this world, and what ways can we use human consciousness to unravel these systems as much as possible. But one thing that happened in the systems theory class is you dismantle one system, you have to be very intentional about what gets created in that vacuum. And I think that is a lesson that I really reflected on. Like, if what we can dismantle everything and burn the whole system down, but if we're not simultaneously creating something new, the system will just adjust, and it won't necessarily make anybody else free.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I have lots of podcasts that I'm subscribed to, and I've always got a recommendation for somebody who needs one. But one of them is Brown Rice Hour by Conda Mason, and she was talking to a guest whose first name was Micah, I think. But one of the things that Micah was talking about was, yeah, I mean, I don't really fall into like, I mean, we gotta tear this thing down because I'm not sure what's under there. Like, I don't know what's beneath that, and and then basically, the folks who currently have capital, the folks who currently have power, have the capacity to reconstruct whatever they desire from the ashes, and we don't necessarily have all of the tools at our disposal yet that we need.
Yeah.
So yeah, it is certainly a proposition and a notion to kind of reflect on how we proceed there. Um, what um, Wild card question. Resist, reimagine, rebuild, reform. What's your favorite organizer R?
Oh, that's good. My favorite organizer are, I like resist and rebuild, but I think more in my heart, I like reimagine. Um, I like living in this space of what could be possible. And rebuild is to me, it's like you have to use the tools that were already there. There's a rebuild, but reimagining is like let's wipe this whole slate and imagine something else. I like that. Is a great wild card question.
Yeah, yeah, no, just kind of, something that came to my mind. And I think Micah brought it up as well, just thinking about reimagining and just thinking about those R's. Um, so, this is going to echo or harken back to some of the family history. So you've mentioned your father having cerebral palsy. Have been deeply affected recently, by the passing of two folks who really grounded me in the fact that I wasn't really designing accessible spaces and I wasn't attentive to that. So, I am wondering about how this familial connection to disability has affected the way that you think about designing spaces that are accessible to everybody, and then if there's a specific sort of notion around disability justice that you really boost up in spaces at all.
I think one of the most important things for me around accessible spaces is making sure that folks who have disabilities are in the room when things are being designed. Because I could say, my father needed a ramp or whatever thing, but it's one, it's me saying that, not the person who is the most directly impacted. And one of the big gaps that I do see is just having folks who, he used different terminology. He liked to call himself differently abled, because there was literally nothing that he uh, couldn't do because he walked on crutches, and that was a testament to his life. He did all the things, but I think for me, I tend to just notice when folks aren't in the room, especially if we start talking about disability rights. Like, it's great for a bunch of advocates to advocate for those things, but um, it's more powerful when folks who are directly impacted are making the decisions and are in the spaces themselves and in power to choose that stuff, choose whatever they need.
Hmm. And so, so then, building off of that, you talked a bit about sort of spirituality informing some of your organizing earlier. I'm wondering, about where you draw the sort of values that you bring to, your work, and sort of what informs the development of new values in your life at this moment.
So my spiritual journey has been interesting. We have 8 minutes left, so I don't even know if I can get into it.
It's all
But
good.
I
Facilitate
grew up.
the facilitator's privilege. I can nudge over the 8 minute window. It's not like they'll cut us off, but go ahead.
Okay. um, so spirituality and faith were huge parts of my childhood. However, what was also a huge part of my childhood was white evangelical Christianity, and that the racism that we experienced from people who professed that faith was remarkably traumatic in some ways. And what has motivated me, though, is like, I knew that wasn't the God that I served. Like, I knew that wasn't what it was supposed to be. um but I think a lot of my motivation comes from a belief that God is a part of all of us, that there's this oneness that we are a part of, and we disconnect ourselves from it. And so part of my work is to also help people remember that there is a part of them that is transcendent. And that's just my belief system. I still identify as a Christian because my interpretation of Christ's mission and ministry is wholly unlike what I have seen from the churches that I grew up in. But I still move forward in a space that is welcoming to everyone, and where there's truly no condemnation, as the Bible actually says. So yeah, I think all of that motivates where I come from and what I do.
Yes, and it complex spiritual journeys are no stranger to me. I often tell folks like, hey, I mean, I was in an apocalyptic religious organization for 3 years in my early 20s.
Me too. Did we talk about that?
I
That's a
think
whole other
yeah.
conversation.
Yeah. I mean, and I mean, and I flipped from that to something else. I mean, I became an atheist for a while. That seemed hollow. I developed my own sort of cosmologies, and one of the things that I find myself in is, as I am engaging in these deep reads of history, as this sort of reads of the mythology of a Lovecraft country, the actual histories of a Tulsa, the stories of the black and being black in Appalachia. All of these for me inform a tapestry that is a cosmology, is a history, is something that's transcendent. And so I am just I find a deep spiritual sense, or a deep transcendent sense in all of these layers that inform this history.
Yeah. I That really resonates with me. I agree. That's real.
So, in this time we have left, what do you want folks to know about the current work of Blackroots Alliance? What do you want them to be engaged with? Are there things that they should look out for? Just let us know how folks should support and plug into the work of Blackroots.
Well, folks are I would encourage you to go to our website, blackrootsalliance.org. But most importantly, check out the amazing work of our partners, Soul, Black Lives Matter Chicago, Medics, Equity and Transformation, Grow Greater Englewood. There's some amazing organizing happening in really, transformative spaces. I'm so proud of all of our partners, and they're just doing the hard work, the real work, the frontline work, everything from environmental justice to reimagining the economy. So please check out all of our partners and come visit us for the conversation.
Absolutely. And what hmm, what is a text or in fact, here we'll go to the Co-op for Lib closer, right? So this is another one I'm springing on you. So yeah, again at Co-op for Lib, we're always asking for these we're asking for cultural offerings now to help close out the space. And so I am wondering, what's a cultural offering that you're really holding right now that's been really significant, really impactful, and important to you that you might like to offer to the viewers, listeners of the Ujamaa Hour, that helps to close out this space.
Wow. So there's a song that my dad wrote called It's a New Day, and someone sent it to me on YouTube because it was just existing in the world. Somebody found it. And it is such a beautiful, like, beboppy song. And I play that on repeat now because I can hear my dad singing in the background. But it is just a reminder that it's a new day and you have a whole new opportunity to build the life that you want to live. And I don't have the link handy because I did not know this question was going to be asked. But I will send it to you so maybe you can post it later. But yeah, it's called "It's a New Day" by my dad.
Okay. And I mean, I know this is dad, but the artist name is.
Oh yeah, Robert Johnson. The artist he's one of he wrote it and he
Okay.
produced it. So the artist name actually escapes me, but in the background and producing it and writing it is Robert Johnson.
Okay. Okay. So, produced and written by Robert Johnson. It's a New Day. That's our closing cultural offering. That kind of grounds us. We appreciate the work of Katelyn Johnson with Blackroots Alliance. We appreciate that organizer origin story. Before we go, Afrofuturism. What is Afrofuturism doing for you, or what do you sort of feel about this notion of Afrofuturism?
Oh wow, Afrofuturism is uh, the world that I want to live in. It is all the things that I want to see Black folks be able to experience and succeed in and learn and live and just have the fullest of human potential. And for me, I'm not reading anything in particular related to Afrofuturism right now, but there's a lot of content out there because a lot of folks are just visioning, and Afrofuturism is just visioning for a world where Black folks survive and we're telling our own stories and
Yeah,
living the lives that we want to live.
Black folks in the
And I
future.
also want to make a clarifying point. My dad's song he wrote under the name Bob Johnson, not Robert. I
Okay.
want to get it right so that he doesn't say something to me in my dreams like, "Hey, you got it wrong."
Okay, okay. Bob Johnson, right. So not to be confused with the other, Robert Johnson.
Yes, yes.
Yes. That's hilarious. I was listening to that Black and Appalachia podcast earlier, and Nikki Giovanni was talking about her grandfather. And there's a wonderful, segue story around, this grandfather protecting her grandmother, who, some white person wanted to, take on a lynch mob, and all the black men being in the store, with their weapons drawn, and the white folks peering in the store and saying, "Must have been a mistake." But that grandfather's name was John Brown. So yeah, not to be confused with the other John Brown.
Right.
Yes. Yeah. So to that point, Afrofuturism, Black folks are in the future, and Katelyn Johnson is sure of that. Katelyn Johnson, the executive director of Blackroots Alliance, committed to the safety and liberation of all Black people, and that's a capital ALL, all Black people. And so we are envisioning, imagining, and building all of these new systems that will hold the ambitions, dreams, hopes, aspirations, desires of Black people going forward. And we're building an arc, but it's not a prescriptive arc. It's an arc that is is being built on the fly, and all hands are on deck with it. So we appreciate you coming on to share with us your arc of the story, the arc that you're working on.
Thank you. Thank you. It's so great. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. And, I bid you good evening.
All right. Talk to you later.
All right. All right, folks. That has been the February edition of the Ujamaa Hour. Um, Thank you all for coming on this evening. Thank you all for joining the broadcast. Be sure to look out February 14th for Cooperation for Liberation Study and Working Group, 3 p.m. to 6 p.m. We meet over Zoom. And right now we're working on building that comic and zine related to freedom farmers. So we're really trying to kind of unpack the ideas of Dr. Monica White, related to freedom farmers, and do it in a way that kind of that is very true to the popular education philosophy of Paulo Freire. Um, so join us, even if you haven't read the text. You might have something to contribute to the zine. You might have a reflection. You might have a piece of artistry, something visual, something some other type of medium. Whatever you have, we appreciate you joining us there. So go ahead and check out Cooperation for Liberation Study and Working Group on Facebook. You can find our event times there. You can find a link to the Zoom registration page, and do be sure to check out the work of Blackroots Alliance, blackroots.alliance.org. And join us here next month. Let's take a glance at the schedule here. So coming up in the next month, we're going to have Martine Cavell from Ujimaa Medics. So one of those partners from the Blackroots Alliance is going to be on here next month. So look out for Martine. In April, Latier Pifus is coming back talking about some more work for the Womanist Working Collective. May, Dominique, Liz, and Laura from Durut Consulting. June, Brandon from Feed the People Shy. July, Taryn from Getting Grown Collective. August, we've got another check-in from Baltimore, and I am now forgetting Baltimore, but forgive me. We'll get the schedule updated. We've got a check-in from Baltimore in August. Hafi from People's Hub in September. And we have a confirmation from October that I also haven't filled in. And we also do have someone pending for the December slot. So lots more to come on the Ujamaa Hour up here in 2021. More conversations, intimate and informal conversations on the Black social and solidarity economy. We appreciate you checking in with us. We will be releasing that podcast soon as well. That episode should be hot on the decks this week. You might hear some content that you heard on tonight's broadcast on that podcast, but that'll be the opening episode that will launch the podcast, and then we'll start to kind of line up the interviews that we've had since 2018. So be sure to follow the Coconut Collaborative Facebook page for more information about that. And we will see you back here on March 8th for that conversation with Martine to see what Ujimaa Medics is working on for the health and safety and liberation of Black communities. So join us. We appreciate you. And with all of that stated, thank you all for joining us this evening. Until then, I bid you all peace.